Hi everyone, I've got a DIY video for you today. It would appear that my Why I Don't Buy from Goth Labels video struck a chord with quite a few of you, judging from the comments that I got afterwards. If you haven't seen it, I will put the link down in the description below. Although in that video I did explain how to recreate that particular skirt that I liked a lot, I thought it would be a good idea to put my money where my mouth is and actually do it. And for two reasons. One, because I really liked how it looked, and two, because it's often easier to follow instructions if you can actually see what the person means. A comment was left by someone called Gothiogenie or Gothiogenie, and I'm sorry if I've said that wrong, and she made an extremely good point that some of the companies like Wish and Alibaba don't necessarily pay their suppliers fair wages, and that maybe the conditions that their workers are in are not what we would like. And whilst you can never really guarantee that with any of the brands you're buying from, I don't particularly want to support sweatshop conditions. So to that end, I decided that I would use second-hand items to make my skirt to recreate that look. I headed straight onto eBay, and I was actually quite specific and quite narrow with my search parameters. I wanted a size-specific skirt, and I'll explain a bit more about that later. Obviously, it had to be black, it had to be lace, and I wanted it full length. Not only that, I wanted it located in the UK, I wanted it used, and I wanted it less than a tenner. It took about a week to find the right skirt. It then took another week for me to buy it, and it has now arrived. Here it is. It is actually new. It's not used at all. I've still got sellotape on the zip pull. I don't know if you can see that. I will leave a picture of it so that you can see it in a bit more detail. It is Marks and Spencer's. Funny that, eh? It is gathered into a fixed waistband, size specific. The reason for that is sometimes I find the one size elasticated waistbands can be quite bulky, and although, as I've said to you before, you can cover a messy waistband with a nice wide waspy belt, sometimes I find them just a little bit uncomfortable. They're too much bulk round my waist. So I personally wanted to have a fitted solid waistband. Gathered in with quite big box pleats, and it has this slightly frilled scallop edge. The lace itself is quite heavy, it's quite detailed, which I like. It's not quite full length, it's sort of 3/4 shin. It's not all the way to my ankles, but as I'm going to swag the skirt anyway, that's not really an issue. The skirt I've got is fully lined, which gives me options. From my cupboard of much fabric, I have pulled a couple of lengths of black crushed velvet. So I could actually sew a large panel of that onto the bottom of the lining and recreate the skirt in its entirety. However, if I just make this an overskirt, it gives me much more versatility. I can wear it over all kinds of skirts. I can wear it over a velvet skirt, I can wear it over a silky skirt, I can wear it over a chiffon skirt. So I'm going to remove this lining, and I have that earmarked for a different project. So I will be careful with it and use that for something else. Using a pair of very sharp scissors, I am cutting the lining off as close to the waistband as possible, taking care not to cut through the lace, so all of this will have to come off. So the base of the skirt, or one side of it at any rate, is 105 centimetres, which is 41 inches. So I will end up with 3 equal panels of 35 centimetres each. So I've measured 35 centimetres, but it actually came just into this next scallop. So I've gone back into the highest point of this scallop and I've marked it with a pin. You will see that I've used a safety pin. I would normally use a dressmaker's pin, but because this fabric is so open wove, a regular dressmaker's pin is more likely to fall out, especially when I'm yanking the fabric around to put the other pins and stuff in. So to make sure I get this equal, what I'm going to do now is simply fold it down the middle seam to take the same measurement from centre, mark that with a pin, and then mark the two at the front. So here are the marks for my swags, 2 on the back and 2 on the front. I want my swags about 6 inches deep, so I'm going to run my gather stitching up to 12 inches and I'm going to stitch it parallel with that back seam. I seem to have lost my metal ruler, so I'm going to mark this again with a safety pin and then draw along a straight edge with my tailor's chalk. Hope you can see this, the white chalk mark, that is my stitch line. Of course I would normally use black thread, but I'm using white today so that hopefully you'll be able to see it. I'm going to have the narrow stitch with the longest stitch length. Starting at the hem, I'm going to stitch up to the marker pin along that gather line. Turn it, take my pin out, go back the other way. You can see it's already started to gather on itself because I'm not giving it any tension as I'm drawing it through. I want these threads quite long so that I've got something to hold on to. So I've marked and sewn the other 3 gather lines. I have done the same up the side seam to a height of 12 inches. Take 2 threads from the same side of your skirt like so, and then just push the fabric up the threads. When your gather has reached the desired length, so from the top of your gather stitching to the bottom of your skirt, when that has reached the desired length, which in my case is 6 inches, tie those 2 off. So I'm just going to check the length. And that's more by luck than judgment, I think. So I've got the right length now. I'm going to tie off those two threads. That's holding that gather in place now. I'm going to do the same on the other side. Making sure, or trying to make sure, that I don't gather the fabric up any further. So I followed all the steps that you've seen in the previous video, and once I hung it up, I didn't like the way it hung, so I've taken it all out, unstitched it all, and I've done it again. The difference this time is that I've started 2 inches above the hemline, and I've taken the gather stitching 2 inches up. I still have some adjustment to do, but you can see the swags are sitting quite nicely. You can still see the threads from the gather stitching. Basically, if you're happy for the swags to sit where they may and fall where they may, you're done. Provided the threads from the gather stitching are tied up nice and tight, you're done. It should hold. But if, like me, you want them a little bit more regular, or if you just want to make absolutely sure that these gathers will stay in place, all you have to do is just spread the gathers out evenly along the gather stitching, and then run another row of stitching, this time with a much shorter stitch, so 1 or 2 on your sewing machine, and that will keep these gathers and pleats in place. I'm using a bit of scrap fabric here just to demonstrate how to do this by hand, and I've drawn my gather line onto it, and I'm going to designate as this end as being the top of my gather. So take a length of cotton and put a knot into one end, and start at the top of your gather line, go in from under and come through, and make sure you're doing this on the wrong side of the fabric. Pull it through, pass the needle between the 2 threads. That will secure the knot in place, and then just do a loose running stitch, quite large stitches, all the way down that line. Doesn't have to be the neatest stitching in the world, because you will be using the same colour cotton as the fabric you're working on, so no one will see it anyway. So there's the gather line stitched. I'm going to turn it round because I'm right-handed. I work better the other way, and it's the same principle. You basically just work the fabric up the gather stitch. Until you achieve the amount of gather that you want. And 2 things you can do here. You can either just tie it off with a knot. What I prefer to do if I'm hand stitching is just put another stitch in to secure it, create the knot through the stitching, do a couple of those, to secure the gather stitch in place. If you're happy to let gravity do its thing and you'll end up with all the pleats falling to the bottom of the gather line, that's fine. Just let it hang. Otherwise, if you want it more regular, spread the folds more equally along the gather stitching, and then go back along it with your thread and stitch the pleats in, taking care not to gather the fabric further. So these stitches will probably have to be smaller, and it might be worth doing a few back stitches that will help to secure the pleats in the place that you want them. It's a little bit difficult to show you on this scrap of fabric, but I wasn't going to waste a larger piece of fabric to show you. So as you can see, that back stitch there has just held that pleat in place. 6 gathers done like that will probably take you no more than an hour. So I thought I would put the skirt onto a white one so that you could see it a little bit better, just to see how the pleats hang, how the swags hang. Here is a recreation of the look that actually started it all. I have a crushed velvet skirt, and I have put the lace swagged skirt on over the top. I hope you can see the two textures there. Here I've put the swag skirt over a raw silk one. Hope you can see this. I actually like this better than the velvet version that sent me on this path in the first place. Here is my ever faithful stalwart, my Florence and Fred cotton jersey skirt with the swag over the top. So there it is, and I hope you'll agree that it's quite easy to do and rather effective once it's done. The great thing about that particular swagging technique is that it can be used on all kinds of fabrics, as long as they're not stiff, as long as they're quite light and they will flow well. So a soft cotton jersey or a soft sort of silky type material, you can do it with chiffon, you can do it with lace. The other thing with it is that you can make those swags as deep or as shallow as you like, with skirts as long or as short as you like. You can make any number of different looks from a simple cheap skirt just by sewing a few runs and pulling on a few threads. I hope this video has been useful and has served as inspiration. Until the next time, take care. Bye.